Bethany. Thank you for watching DIY comic illustration class. This is class number 3.
This is a really fun interactive class, which is great. But what ends up happening is that the kids end up talking and laughing and working on comics. So I decided to set my class up this week, putting all the tables in a triangle. I have 10 students, so I have a student in the middle of the table and then on each end. And so they're kind of around the outside. That way I can be in the middle, I can pass the material around as they're working, I can kind of spin around and show everybody my examples, and they can see each other, but they all have to look at me when I need their attention because this is just a really fun class.
Last week's homework, the students picked characters that they are going to hopefully have developed on their own at home. And so this week we are going to be working on drawing those characters with as many different expressions as we can. So with the same style of eye, the same style of hair, the same shape of face, the same body shape, the same clothes on, and consistent coloring on each one of those drawings, we'll see that those characters in all these different expressions. That way the students will have the ability to go home and make more comic strips, and they will already have the image of what their character would have looked like if they were sad, if they were happy, if they were scared.
One thing that a lot of art teachers get wrong, they try to have their kids produce a piece of artwork that is going to impress their parents. But in the long run, a lot of times it's not helping a student actually grow as an artist, and producing something that's pretty in the end doesn't exactly promote future art. And so I don't want the students to be one-trick ponies with this class. I want them to have developed their characters, drawn them many, many ways so that they are inspired to go back home and create more characters, more stories from the characters that we've worked on, and create inspiration, not just a pretty piece of art.
And here is a list of keywords that are images you can print to show the kids. You'll need to find your own images on Google or Pinterest and look up these keywords and find things that would be applicable to each student, especially based on what they need. So for my illustration, I specifically needed to look up what would a person's face look like if they were cold. So I didn't need to conjure that up in my brain. I needed to Google it, or to have someone in front of me and say, look cold for me, and see what happens to their face.
Some examples of things that I printed for my students were rich cats and alley cats. I printed cartoon men in suits. I printed specific dogs that the kids had picked, farmers and farmers' wives, and gardening things. I printed some Star Wars ships. I printed off at least 3 pages for each one of my students for inspiration, and they liked having the extra examples, and I knew that they weren't going to take the time to print things on their own, and it definitely has improved their work.
So along with bringing all your comic books in that they can also use for inspiration, bring these papers of ideas for facial expressions that they will practice drawing their character over and over using tracing paper and sketch paper.
Today the students are only drawing their characters' faces over and over in every expression that they have time to make. They are not working on bodies or backgrounds or words or anything else. They are only working on their characters' facial expressions. They need to start by having each character with a plain face facing forward, so just straight from the front. And then they will use tracing paper over top to try to change the different features on the face to make them look like they're doing different things. So walk around the class and help the students to be able to figure out what their character is going to look like when they're doing different things. Make sure that they have a standout feature for each one of their characters. Make sure all the examples are spread around the room and rotate them, because the kids won't do it on their own. So rotate those books, rotate the examples, and have them look at the examples. They're going to have a tendency to want to just do their own thing, and that is wonderful, but while they're in class, they need to be pushed a little further than that. Also talk to them about what might make a character look rich or poor, or smart or dumb, and get on your phone and look up what does make someone look that way. One of the books I read said that if you want your illustrated characters to look dumb, separate out their eyes a little further. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it could be. So have the kids describe what their characters' strengths and weaknesses are and how you can illustrate that better. Spread out the examples of all the facial expressions that you have printed as examples. Try really hard to find examples on Pinterest and on Google that have the same face over and over with different expressions, and have the kids tell you, okay, say, when someone's happy, what happens to their eyes? What happens to their mouth? What happens to their eyebrows? Okay, when someone's angry, what happens to their eyebrows? What happens to their eyes? What happens to their mouth? And just talk about what happens to the face only for different facial expressions and different reactions. And they need to try to recreate that with their characters. My van is so dirty that I bought this book a couple months ago, and we just found it in my van, so I apologize that it's not on the supply list, but this was my favorite book while I was trying to create the process for my class. It would be a wonderful thing to tell the parents of your students to get for any of their kids that are super interested in comic illustration. This book does a really good job of helping create characters, do character development. It also does a really good job of telling you ways that you can get exposure for your comics, contests that you could enter, ideas of how you can be published, where you can publish, and what a special thing, what a unique thing, even if they don't go on to do this for a living. So this is a wonderful book, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by sending this book home with the student that is struggling the most in my class. And it's pretty obvious which kids kind of need a little more direction and they hear what I'm saying in class, but I think if they took a book home and really kind of internalized everything, that they would do better. So each week I'm going to send this book home with a different student, have them bring it back, and they can read through it, and if they are really into this, they will devour it, and if they're really not, they'll just bring it back and you guys can move on.
One of the things that I read about creating comic characters is that each character should have one very specific trait about them that makes it so you know from frame to frame, you know that that is the same character. So I made my girl with red hair, and I kept my kitty white and gave him really jagged edges and especially a really jagged tail. So you want to make sure that your students' characters have something distinguishable. They also need to be fairly simple so that they can recreate them. Most comic characters keep the same clothes on all the time. You think about superheroes, they always have the same outfit on.
If you feel comfortable, try to provide very gentle feedback for your students. It doesn't take an artist to be able to look at an image and interpret it as an onlooker and not as the artist sees it. For example, this student created a character that was not a main character and is not a character that she wants to develop and have in any other comic strips. I think his beard looks really kind of creepy. He's going to steal the show because he's too unique and he's part of the comic, but she ended up kind of trimming his beard and making it more like a regular goatee, and it looks really cute. At the very end of my class, with 5 minutes left, I had all the students walk around without saying anything. They just walked around the class, rotating around, looking at what everyone else had done. Then once they had sat down, I picked up each student's work, the best thing that they were working on at that point, and just said what I liked about it. And again, it doesn't have to be an art review. It can just be this is so cute, or I love how I want to get to know this character more, or you're doing such a good job of making this person look silly and wealthy, or I can tell you worked really hard on this character and look how much they've changed it and now look how wonderful it is. So just try at the end of class, give everybody a little ego boost before you send them home. And finally, if you are watching this series and you are a teacher or you are a homeschool teacher, if you know a group of kids that is interested in art or should be, then please share these videos, like and subscribe, and help me to be able to make more classes in the future.